Dr. Wendy Zierler. Acholtenu, at hayi le'alfei revava. Ziva Zierler has been found worthy to be a spiritual leader. Nimtza'a ru'uya lihiyot manhiga ruchanit lahorot livnei ulivnot Yisrael. Al kain samchinan ota b'smicha umuteret livsok binyanei halacha al pi Toreh b'isur v'heter.
Because I've taught for 20 years at a rabbinical school, it has long been assumed by those who have invited me to speak and teach in their communities that I was a rabbi. I have a drawer full of Rabbi Wendy Zierler name tags that were prepared for me that I was not able in good conscience to don, that is, until today. After all of these years, I am proud, finally, to put on a Rabbi Wendy Zierler name tag. I'm so sorry that my mom and dad, who both died during my studies at Maharat, aren't here to see me wear it. In putting on this tag, I'm not merely adding another prefix to my name or another degree to my resume. Adding women rabbis to the Orthodox community is not simply an instance of add women and stir. It's a paradigm shift. Rabbinic Judaism, of course, is no stranger to paradigm shifts and the kinds of reevaluations of core values that they occasion. Take, for example, the entire institution of rabbinic prayer and the structure of the Pesach Seder, major shifts enacted after the destruction of the temple. Or take, for example, the 2nd and 18th Mishnayot in the first chapter of Pirkei Avot. Mishnah 2 teaches in the name of Shimon HaTzadik, one of the last members of the Knesset HaGdolah, that the world is sustained by 3 things, the number 3 corresponding to the 3 patriarchs, Al HaTorah, Ve'al HaAvodah, Ve'al Gmilut Chasadim, Torah, temple worship, and acts of loving kindness. Mishnah 18, in the name of Shimon ben Gamliel, who lived after the destruction of the Second Temple, rewrites the 3 things that sustain the world in light of lost sovereignty and the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Says Shimon ben Gamliel, Al shlosha dvarim ha'olam omed, al hadin, ve'al ha'emet, ve'al ha'shalom. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel used to say, 3 things sustain the world: justice, truth, and peace. The ordination of women as rabbis calls for the reformulation of the very idea of the Mesorah, not only as Pirkei Avot, but as Pirkei Imahot. As such, I'd like to offer a new formulation of the things that sustain the world, not just 3 things corresponding to the Avot, the 3 forefathers, but 4, like the Imahot, the 4 foremothers. I offer these 4 things to highlight what has changed fundamentally with the advent of women's learning, teaching, and leadership. Al arba'a dvarim ha'olam omed. Al halimud, ve'al ha'ahava, ve'al shivyon ushleimut. Al halimud, on learning, because women's learning, first and foremost, has changed everything in ways that we have only begun to appreciate. Al ha'ahava, on love. Love is at the center of our daily liturgical declarations of faith, v'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha, and at the center of our ethical convictions, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and yet it appears on neither of the prior Pirkei Avot lists of sustaining values. One of the contributions that women's leadership and teaching can offer is the restoration of love to the primary place that it ought to occupy in our religious consciousness. Love of God, love of Torah, love of family, and love of humanity. Al shivyon, on equality. The very first chapter of the Torah teaches that all human beings are created in the image of God. The ordination of women and the full enlistment of women in the project of Jewish leadership, decision-making, and spirituality bring us closer to the actualization of that principle of fundamental equality and human dignity. Ushleimut, and wholeness. If God is presented in Shir HaShirim Rabbah as Hamelech Shahashalom Lo, the king whose domain is peace, the feminine noun shlemut urges us to consider the Havaya Shahashlemut La, the divine being defined by wholeness and inclusivity in religious and social life. The principle of shlemut urges us in our democratic modern times to embrace and develop a more gender-inclusive theology, liturgy, social view, and religious practice that stand for true wholeness and peace in our community and our world.